Welcome to the Fearfully and Wonderfully Me podcast, a podcast designed to help you increase your influence, develop your leadership, and maximize your results. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's podcast. I wanted to just do a whole podcast episode and talk about what I learned when I recently got to meet Attorney General Barr, Governor and Mrs. Kemp, and Ivanka Trump. And this was an incredible opportunity. I posted a few pictures on social media recently. So I wanted to share with you the story of how it all came about and then talk about the lessons that I've learned this week. And so it truly was just an honor and a privilege. If you've been following my podcast, or you follow me on social media, or maybe you've read some of my books, you probably know I do some volunteering with a lot of groups of trafficking survivors in our area. And I'm fortunate to be able to give back in that way. And I teach the same leadership and personal growth principles to these groups of young girls and survivors that I do in my workshops for women. They're the same principles, right? The principles don't change. The principles for personal growth and the principles that help us be successful as individuals apply to all of us. It's like gravity. Gravity applies to all of us. Personal growth and leadership principles are exactly the same. They apply to all of us. And so it's always a privilege to be able to teach these regardless of the setting. I enjoy it just as much with a huge conference with 1,500 people in the audience as I do with a group of just 9 or 10 survivors, or even smaller groups sometimes. And it's one of the ways that I am passionate about sharing not just my story, but also the principles that I've learned to help me transform from that trafficking victim 20 years ago to speaking at a TEDx stage and speaking at the United States Capitol this year. It's been an incredible journey, but one thing's for sure, that transformation doesn't happen by accident. And so I'm passionate about sharing the principles. This year has been particularly great because I published and wrote Fearfully and Wonderfully Me, my newest book, Become the Woman You Are Destined to Be. And so I now really have a great set of principles articulated, almost a type of curriculum for worksheets, and the accompanying workbook is a great tool for, and not just trafficking survivors. This book isn't specific to survivors. It's for any woman who wants to reach her potential, who wants to become the woman she is destined to be. So this year has just been incredibly powerful, and I'm just so privileged to have had so many opportunities to be able to reach more people this year. And last week, as I record this, you will get this a few days after I actually record this, I got a phone call just over the weekend from the director of a program where I do some volunteer work, and I do some of the sessions on Fearfully and Wonderfully Me. In fact, they actually purchased a bunch of the books to teach and to use with the girls and survivors. So they purchase the books, and I donate, my time and services, and then I donate some other books as well. So it's one of the ways that I can give back. And so the director called me just quite unexpectedly. In fact, it was so late, I think I might have already turned my phone off. One of the ways I have I protect my personal boundaries is in the evening, as I start to wind down, I turn my phone to do not disturb so that I don't get, too many text messages or phone calls or emails that tend to derail my brain. And if my brain starts getting on to thinking about the work that I'm doing and involved with, which is incredible opportunity, but then I find I can't go to sleep. And so one of the ways that I set a personal boundary that helps me manage that and make sure that I get, to protect my sleep and my self-care is that I turn my phone to do not disturb usually. And I think I had already done that, but occasionally, even after I've turned it to do not disturb, which basically means it won't ring or ding or anything like that, it just allows me the space to go check it if I want to and when I'm ready to, rather than be disturbed or disrupted in the middle of something else. So I had already flipped to do not disturb, but I did go check my phone, and I had a voicemail from the director of this program. And so I called her back, and she said, it's time sensitive. Would you just give me a call back? And so I called her back, and I got her voicemail. And so I was leaving a message, and I just said, it's 8:30. If you want to give me a call tonight, I'll be up for, another little while. Feel free to do so. And so she did. She called me back in a few minutes and just shared an incredible opportunity. She shared that the work that the program was doing and the sessions that we've been doing with the girls that I volunteer with had gotten some incredible recognition. And Attorney General Barr and Ivanka Trump and Governor and Mrs. Kemp were coming to tour their new facility. And she asked if I would come and talk about the sessions, talk about my story, and talk about the work that we've been doing with the girls on Fearfully and Wonderfully Me in some of the sessions. And there would be other people throughout the tour and the presentation as well, but she wanted me to speak to kind of my piece and share my story and why it was impactful for the work that we were doing. And obviously, that's an incredible opportunity. It's certainly not every day that one gets to meet with people, influencers at that level. Now, politics aside, I'm not interested in the politics. I hope that that doesn't derail you from listening to the rest of this podcast. But truly, politics aside, what I'm interested in is people who have enough character that they want to make a difference in a problem of this magnitude that affects so many people. Human trafficking, whether it's sex trafficking or labor trafficking, is a $2 billion a year industry just here in the metro Atlanta area. $2 billion are made from people selling other people. And to me, that's a tragedy. It's a tragedy if it happens to one person, but to think it's happening at this scale. And so I've just been incredibly impressed by some of the work that is going on in this space to combat this evil, particularly within recent years. More awareness than ever before. Social media probably helps that. So there again, politics aside, because I'm not interested in the politics as much as I'm interested in the character of leaders who want to make a difference. And so it was, you know, the session was scheduled to happen on a Monday morning, and they asked us to be there early, of course, for security and to kind of get an idea of how the presentation was going to go. And I'm an early person anyway, so I was an extra early just to make sure I didn't get caught up in traffic or anything like that. But I would much rather be too early and have extra time than be too late or feel unprepared. So I was glad to be able to go early. And it was pretty just to give you an idea of how the whole experience went. The first part of the session was really just a tour of the facility. So the VIPs come in, and of course, there's security and there's reporters, and then there are the people, the other people, and the coaches from the facility and the caseworkers, and each one was invited to speak on their part for a few minutes, so they could talk about the work that they were doing and how it was making an impact. And the tour piece probably took 45 minutes, I'm guessing. I really wasn't paying attention to my watch. And then myself and one other survivor and Miss Trump and Attorney General Barr and Governor and Mrs. Kemp stepped into a side room, and the press really wasn't invited much into that room, and most of the other people weren't invited into that room. But we sat down at a small table and just had a really good small table group discussion around this issue and how we can better serve survivors. And so I was invited to share my story and talk about the book. I was just privileged to be able to give a book to each one of those VIPs, and talk about not just my story, because as I told them in the session, a lot of people can tell a story. But what's impactful is when we can share the story, but we can do something good with it, right? We all face adversity in life, but what happens to us isn't important as what we do and who we become because of it. And when I say that a lot, but the reason I say that is because it's taking something that was terrible or painful or hurtful and learning to use that in a positive way. I like to say that God doesn't cause the pain in our lives, but He can use it. And if you're going through something that's tough and you're struggling to see the light at the end of the tunnel, just know that we don't always understand why we go through things. Sometimes we might never find out, but sometimes we don't find out until years later, as was the case for me. It was 13 years after getting out of that terrible situation where my father was sexually abusing me and trafficking me that I figured out how to use that pain for purpose. And that's a journey. I think we all get there in different ways, and we all find a different place for that purpose in our lives. Your purpose may not be to stand on stage and talk about your experience the same way I do, and that's okay. But my point being, as I shared with them, it's one of the things I talk about to the other survivors, or even groups of women that I'm just teaching in some of my workshops, is I share my story, and I share that not to not for anyone to feel sorry for me, but I want to be able to stand in front of people and say, look, if I can overcome what I went through, you can overcome what you have been through or what you are going through. I want to be that shining light and that example that just stands in front of people and says, and gives them hope. So that's the first step. And then, secondly, I like to share the principles and teach the lessons that I've learned. And hopefully, I can help someone else's journey go smoother or faster. I wish I'd learned some of these personal growth principles so many years ago, because life would have been different if I'd learned to first lead and influence myself better and make better choices myself, but then learn how to influence other people earlier. So it's just a privilege, whatever age or demographic my audience is, to be able to share these principles, because I'm passionate about empowering people to learn how to develop themselves and develop into their potential. And it comes down to personal growth, the power of personal growth. Anyway, I do get a little bit of a tangent there because I am just so passionate about it. But these are some of the same key points that I made in this session at the roundtable discussion. I talked about how important it was to learn competencies, but also learn character development. And it's not just important for us as general people, it's important for groups of survivors. It's important for us as women. It's important for us as people. We focus a lot in our society on the competencies, the technical skills, the abilities, going to school, getting a college education, and those things can be important depending on, what you want to do. I mean, obviously competency is important. You have to be able to do whatever it is you want to do and be competent in it. But it's also important to develop our character because our character leverages our competency. So it's one of the things that I loved about volunteering with the project and the sessions that we're teaching is that we're teaching some competencies, but we're also teaching some character development. And I think that's what makes it successful. I know it is because we as people need to know how to develop our character. And if you're like me, nobody really talked about developing my character certainly not in my teenage years, or I really can't remember that. And even in my college classes, there wasn't a lot of focus on how to influence people. It was much more competency based, the majority of it, I think, in fact. And I cannot remember one credit or one college course that talked about how to influence people more effectively. So, just like as I was sharing at the roundtable discussion, I spent the first part when I started speaking, sharing my story, and then talking about how I've been able to grow through that, not just go through that, but grow through that and learn to start sharing my story. And again, not with the intent of just telling the story, but with the intent of sharing the principles that I learned. And I can't come back to that enough because I definitely think that it helps our healing when we go through something traumatic if we're able to share that with someone. But it's important that that's the right setting and the right person. So, for example, if I hadn't yet healed from what I went through, I don't need to be getting on stage talking about it, right? I need to do the work to heal and overcome it before I can be that beacon of hope for someone else. So, all in all, it was just an incredible opportunity, even, during these times of COVID-19, wearing masks is simply a reality, and it, is the opportunity of a lifetime. And I have just a cool, really cool photo of us sitting at the round table discussion, or group table discussion. It wasn't really a round table physically. And of course, I'm wearing my mask. And, that's just the reality that we live with today, is that opportunities come up and we still have to seize them and take advantage of them. And we might have to wear a mask, and that's just reality. You don't say no to the opportunity just because you might have to wear the mask. So it was just an incredible experience, just surreal. I told someone afterward, it's amazing. Like, did that really just happen? Because it's an incredible opportunity for the program, and the to get that type of recognition. It's an incredible opportunity for me as a speaker and author to be able to say, I've been able to share my story with these high level influencers. And it's not about me, but it begins with me, right? It's not about, I'm not there to share my story so they can pat me on the back. That's not it. I'm there to share my story and talk about how we are using that in a positive way and the difference that it can make. It's not about me, but it starts with me. If I'm not able to do that, then I can't really use that in a positive way to make a difference like I've been able to do. So, lessons that I walked away with. Number one, I just reaffirmed to me, the whole experience reaffirmed to me how incredibly important it is for us to learn how to effectively connect with other people. All four of the VIPs were incredibly great at making that personal connection. They were incredibly attentive and listening to whoever was speaking, whether it was one of the therapists or the counselors, or whether it was me sharing my story. They were incredibly attentive, taking notes and writing things down and asking really great thought-provoking questions. And all of these practices are really helpful in helping us make connections with other people. Obviously, when you are attentively listening to someone, it shows that you're interested, that you care about them as a person, that you are paying attention. And I got that feeling from each one of them. I didn't feel like somebody was thinking about what they were going to have for dinner that night. I felt like they were just truly empathically listening and completely focused and connected. And that is a skill set that I recommend everybody practice. Practice it in your personal relationships. Practice it with your friends. Practice it with your professional relationships and connections. And it is a skill. We do have to develop it. And I have certainly experienced times where I should be completely listening to someone and I find my mind wandering or getting off track. So that's going to happen. But just like any skill, the more frequently we practice, the better our ability to connect with other people will be. And that's an incredible tool when it comes to influence. If this group of VIPs had come in and sat down and had made me feel like they weren't really paying attention, or like it didn't really matter when I was talking, I guarantee you their influence with me would have decreased. And instead, their influence with me increased because they made such a great connection. And I really felt like they were paying attention, like they cared, like it mattered. The other thing that they were really great about is smiling intentionally when making eye contact. Now that's important because I was wearing a mask the whole time. There were just a few opportunities where someone would take a mask off to take some water or for something like that, or for just a few minutes for air, but, appropriately social distanced. But it's incredibly important to smile when we make eye contact. And the interesting thing to me is that, sure, it's more difficult to recognize if someone's smiling if they're wearing a mask. But if you're paying attention, have you ever noticed how somebody's eyes crinkle up when they smile? You really have to be paying attention because most of the time we're looking at someone's mouth when they're smiling. But now, if you can't see their mouth, pay attention a little more to their eyes. And you usually can see their face move or their eye expression. And usually that's a really great hint of whether someone is smiling or not. So even if you're wearing a mask, don't get out of the habit of smiling as you make eye contact with people. I used to hear someone give advice. I don't remember where I read it or heard it, but I once heard that a great skill is to always smile as you answer the phone, because the person who's on the other side of the phone can't really see you smiling, but they can almost definitely hear that you are smiling. It changes the energy level of your voice. So when you answer the phone, smile. And I think it's the same way. When you're wearing a mask, still smile. And pay attention to see if the other person is smiling. But what I noticed is that all four of these influencers, again, politics aside, they're definitely having an impact and having influence, both at the community level, at the government level, and in our country, is that they were great about that. And that right there again, it really helps strengthen our connection with other people and our influence. I think the biggest other point that I really noticed is that all four of them were humble. And when I say that, humility is the difference between confidence and arrogance. And I felt like all four of them were very confident, but they didn't have arrogance. I didn't get that feeling. And I love the concept. I think it's C.S. Lewis who said, humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. And that's exactly the feeling I got from this experience, sitting down at the table and talking, is that all four of them were not thinking less of themselves. They were very confident, but they were thinking of themselves less often. They were more focused about other people and how they could make a difference. They were gracious. I felt like they truly cared, but that they truly cared about making an impact and not just making an impression. And that's a big difference, right? That kind of confidence is incredibly valuable when it helps us influence other people, because people who are arrogant quickly lose our trust. If someone is arrogant when they're interacting with us, we feel like they're not truly interested in us. They're more interested in themselves or making themselves look good. And so we don't feel valued. And so even if we don't think about it consciously, we start to lose trust with that person. Their influence with us decreases. I spoke to a group of trafficking survivors. It's just been a few days ago, one day this week, early this week. And one of them came up after the session. She said, "You know what? I really feel like you care about us." She said, "You inspire me because you share your story, but I feel like you're here just to make a difference." And that's incredibly inspiring. And so it was humbling for me, because I do truly want to make a difference with all of the groups I talk to, whether I'm doing a Zoom session with women from around the country and teaching leadership and personal growth principles, or whether I'm teaching personal growth principles and success principles with a group of survivors. There again, the same principles can help us all be effective. But I absolutely do want to make a difference. I'm not interested in teaching these principles to make a dollar. I'm interested in making a difference in the life of someone else. And it's an incredible gift for me. I walk away from being able to do that humbled and feeling privileged and inspired. It's why I do what I do. Mark Twain said the two greatest days in your life are the day you're born and the day you discover why. And it's incredible to wake up every day and know that I've discovered my why. Now, I might be refining how I live it out, and that's okay. That's a journey. When you discover your purpose, it might be an overnight epiphany for you, or it might take you a few years to figure it out. It doesn't matter. When you start to figure out that purpose and you continually grow towards it, the definition or how it lives out in your life may change, and that's okay. That's okay. It's all right, because that just shows that we are growing. I've written 13 books, and all of my books were written after I started sharing my story, but it really wasn't until Fearfully and Wonderfully Me actually, I sat down and actually wrote it this year, that I really felt I'd taken the greatest step forward in refining my purpose and how I could express that and live into it fully. I've enjoyed the experience of teaching on all of my books, whether it's Straight Talk and the Power of Effective Communication, or Prime Time and the Power of Effective Planning. But uh, all of those principles are powerful, but I really felt like Fearfully and Wonderfully Me kind of wrapped that together, and there again, just refined how I'm expressing and making that purpose a reality. So lessons learned walking away. There are quite a few, but those are the two that really stand out. Is regardless of what situation we find ourselves or what station we find ourselves in life, whether you're a stay-at-home mom or the CEO of an organization or a presidential advisor, it's really critical to your ability to influence people to be able to make those connections and then to stay humble in those situations. And it comes down to there again, the more we practice these skills and develop our character, the easier this becomes. Now, we won't get it perfect, just like anything. We won't get it perfect 100% of the time, but I guarantee you, the more you practice this and the more you improve at that, the greater you are going to be able to grow your influence. And you want to grow your influence with everybody. You want to influence clients and family members and spouses and children, and because we want to influence other people. It's just human nature, right? We want to be able to influence people, and we get frustrated when we can't, because then we have less influence and less ability to impact a situation. So thinking about that, there again, just an incredible experience. And when it was all over, it just seems surreal to have been able to say I experienced that. And then I thought, well, what else can I do to share this experience? I've gotten a lot of questions, a lot of interest on social media with people who want to get more involved, and that's great. And then I thought, you know what? I've walked away with some key lessons here from some influential people. Let me pass those lessons learned on to my podcast listeners, because I know you're listening to this podcast. You're interested in developing yourself, and those were some. There again, really powerful affirmations of the principles that we know and we talk about, but affirmation that when we apply them, they really can make a difference in our influence. So until next time.